making the argument to their own population, because let's be clear, there is some dissent in Russia about what is going on, and to countries that are at the moment sitting on the fence, and particularly in the developing world, that this isn't how it was portrayed as plucky little Ukraine against Russia.
Joe Biden starts his tour of the island of Ireland today. Waking up in Northern Ireland, he'll meet all 5 leaders of the main political parties. He might ask them, why isn't the executive sitting still? Amidst, of course, all the backslapping about America's role in the Good Friday Agreement. But can the US president do much? Is much expected of him on this trip? It's certainly been talked up a great deal. Let's speak to Lord Darroch, Kim Darroch, who's UK ambassador to Washington between 2016 and 2019. Morning.
Good morning.
Do you have high hopes about his involvement in some of these quite specific issues, I guess, even about the power sharing?
Look, I think he will be very careful in how he handles his talks with the Northern Ireland political leaders. He will try not to lecture them. He'll try not to put overt pressure on them. He will try and show some understanding, difficult though that can be, for the DUP's position. But yes, he will urge them to get into the get Stormont back and operating and back into power sharing. And I think he will, without being too blatant about it, suggest some incentives in terms of American support, both economic and political, for Northern Ireland. How much that would be improved or strengthened if Stormont was to be reconstituted.
And how involved can Downing Street and the Prime Minister be in guiding him or pushing him in this or that direction on those matters?
I'm sure there will have been discussions about what it would be helpful for the president to say when he sees Northern Ireland political leaders, discussions and briefing about why we think the Windsor framework is such a good agreement, and particularly, this is the point of the DUP, how there is no prospect of getting a better deal than the deal we have done. So it's this or it's nothing. But let's not underestimate American expertise in Irish matters anyway. As you said earlier, they were involved in the original Good Friday Agreement. Senator Mitchell was a key figure chairing some of the talks. So they know their stuff on Northern Ireland. So we will certainly have been talking to them about it, but it's not like we were briefing them from scratch.
Yeah. But the US has never been perceived as an entirely impartial participant in these matters on the island of Ireland, have they? And at the moment, it seems like there are concerns, especially from Democratic Unionists, that Joe Biden is, Nigel Dodds told The Telegraph that the Biden administration is transparently pro-nationalist. Sammy Wilson, the DUP MP, says he's anti-British.
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair comment at all. I think certainly if you go back in time, back to the decades of the Troubles, the 70s and the 80s, the American administrations at the time were perceived as being broadly pro-nationalist. But let's not dismiss the impact that President Clinton had, for example, in encouraging the peace process, and particularly individuals like Senator Mitchell, who I've met, who I can promise you is absolutely not biased in one way or another, and simply was working to produce peace there. So I think we've moved on from those days, though it doesn't surprise me that there are some DUP members who still hark back to them. But it's time to get away from history and look to the future. And what the future needs is an operating executive in Northern Ireland.
How much can this trip be seen as something of a snub to the UK? I only ask because we keep talking about this as Biden visiting the UK. He's only going to be in Northern Ireland for 15 hours, most of which he'll be asleep. And then he's hot-footing it straight to the Republic of Ireland, where he seems a lot more engaged in matters about his Irish heritage. The Prime Minister, we know, isn't necessarily getting a full bilateral. It's just a quick coffee with the President.
Yeah. I understand the speculation about this. I don't buy it myself. First of all, Biden saw Rishi Sunak recently on the western coast of America when you had the AUKUS meeting with him and the Australian Prime Minister. So there's already been one very recent meeting. Second, I'm sure that they will have had a substantive chat over coffee this morning, and they'll have covered the business that they needed to cover in the few weeks that have passed since they last met. Third, on the visit, look, I'm sure Biden would have stayed longer if there had been a Northern Ireland Assembly to address. It's the result of where we are in Northern Ireland that the visit is a comparatively brief one. He was always going to spend some time, a significant amount of time in the Republic, just because of his roots there. And it's a kind of, it's a sort of victory tour for him there, and it'll be a real moment for him. He's very proud of his Irish roots, but he would have spent more time in Northern Ireland if politics had been different there.
Just finally, the other thing concerning the Biden administration, of course, is these quite serious seeming leaks from the Pentagon, from military intelligence. Lots of interesting nuggets there, not least about the extent to which special forces might play a role in Ukraine, UK special forces, which the MOD isn't commenting on. How embarrassing is that, especially when we still don't know how on earth this actually quite highly classified stuff ended up on a random gaming website?
Yeah, it's a very odd story. Of course, it's damaging. You're absolutely right. Of course, there are angles and reports have come out that the Pentagon, that the US administration, that the West as a whole would not have wanted out there in public. We need to be quite careful about the content, because there are reports. I don't know if they're true, but they seem to me to be well sourced, that some of the documents that have come out have been altered. So not everything that is in them necessarily can be taken as genuine. Genuine government material. I think that the story about Western special forces, albeit in tiny numbers, being in Ukraine, is quite damaging. I'm sure the Russians will use that. If you want,
use it in what way? Sorry, use it in what way?
To show that this is not Ukraine against Russia. It is NATO against Russia. That NATO is heavily involved on ground, is the allegation they will make.
But my point is, what will the effect be in Russia's rhetoric and being able to point to this, or do you think they'll use it as cover for some kind of further incursion in Ukraine or some kind of further step forward?
I think it's more a case of making the argument to their own population, because let's be clear, there is some dissent in Russia about what is going on, and to countries that are at the moment sitting on the fence, and particularly in the developing world, that this isn't how it was portrayed as plucky little Ukraine against Russia.
Lord Darroch, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Kim Darroch, former UK ambassador to Washington.